It's remarkable how practical and well grounded the founders of the United States really were. So in 1787 in Philadelphia, they were working, of course, on the second Constitution of the United States. I remind you that the United States already existed as a country in 1787. And so what you have is the need to make changes, which is why the delegates were sent to Philadelphia to amend the Articles of Confederation. You know the story. Rhode Island didn't send any delegates, and because one state was missing, that was sufficient to really make it impossible to make changes to the Articles of Confederation because unanimity of the states was required. So the delegates, without authorization, decided, since we cannot make any changes, let's dedicate this convention to discarding the Articles of Confederation and writing a new proposal, a new constitution, which eventually became the Constitution of the United States. So the process lasted between May 25th and September 17th of 1787. The Constitution was signed by 40 people, 39 delegates, and one secretary on September 17th, 1787. And it's interesting, that 42 delegates stayed to the very end, but 3 of them did not sign the Constitution. They left without signing: Elbridge Gerry, George Mason, and Edmund Randolph, essentially because they objected to the Constitution not including a Bill of Rights. It's remarkable, doubly remarkable, how pragmatic and practical the founders were, how ready they were to compromise despite their significant differences. They represented different states, different regions of the country. They belonged to different professions. There were planters, lawyers, doctors, merchants, and the age of the delegates also varied. So it spanned from 26-year-old was Jonathan Dayton from New Jersey, and then you had 81-year-old Benjamin Franklin representing Pennsylvania, and then you had everything in between, but they tended to be on the younger side, especially if you compare this to politicians today. So the arithmetic average age of the 42 delegates who actually stayed to the very end was about 44 years. And the median age, the center divider, 43 years. The most frequent age was 32. Alexander Hamilton and a bunch of other delegates were exactly 32 years old. So I'm constantly impressed by the relative youth of these politicians compared to what we have today with recent presidents and with so many members of Congress. And anyway, they understood that you have to have a good lay of the land in front of you in order to create this new document. But with the Great Compromise, they did not even have to be particularly informed about the lay of the land or be particularly sophisticated, although they were. But they didn't have to be because the issue was so stark. Some states like Virginia and Massachusetts had a lot of people, and some states like New Jersey, not a lot. So clearly, if you're going to create a new document and a new polity based on that document, how are you going to take care of the issue of representation? Virginia plan served the interests of Virginia and other big states. So Virginia said, well, you have to have representation based on population. More people, more representatives. New Jersey said, hold on a second, we are all equals. So every state should get the same representation. And as you know, they split the difference. That's the Great Compromise. Had they not been able to do so, then the project would have failed right there and then, and the world history would have been different. American history, world history would have been different. So politics is the art of the possible. As the first chancellor of newly unified Germany, Otto von Bismarck, would say more than a century later. You see, the founders of the U.S. Constitution, without saying so, understood it. Again, they were children, intellectual children of the Enlightenment. And Enlightenment emphasized rationality, it emphasized logic, and which is why they were so grounded. And I think this is lost. A great deal of it is lost sometimes, and not just on first-year students who may be too idealistic and who believe, well, if you cannot get this nearly perfect project, then you shouldn't bother at all. This is also lost on some professors who should know better, but who think that, because they learned a few philosophical ideas, or because, they read a lot of works of fiction, that this gives them an insight on what's right and wrong, good and evil. And what they're going to do is to push an agenda, which of course they know to be right. And those who disagree with them are wrong. And so it's damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. We're going to push for what we believe is right. And this is how these people function in the world. In politics, this does not go very far. It's remarkable how political documents are very much an outgrowth of the soil on which they are written. That is to say, they spring from the conditions, from the very practical, realistic conditions of various interests that are prevalent at the time. And so you wouldn't get anywhere with this convention in Philadelphia without making this initial compromise. And this is how we got our bicameral legislature. Every other compromise was also the result of bargaining. It's not like one side imposes on the other and the other side has to accept. So take the 3/5 compromise, the one that logically followed from the Great Compromise. So if you're going to say, okay, we're going to split the difference, Senate based on equality of the states, the House is going to be based on population. How do you count population? Well, the northern states, who had hardly any slaves at all, who had a lot of hostility towards slavery, and southern states, who had over 90% of all the slaves in the country, had very different ideas on how to count the population. So northern states wanted to count slaves as 0 for the purposes of representation in the House. And of course, the southerners, who had virtually all the slaves, wanted to count them as 1. This is sometimes not understood by people who encounter this compromise for the first time. They think that incorrectly that it was the northerners who had a lot of hostility towards slavery and almost no slaves who wanted to count slaves as 1. This is not true. The northern states wanted to count them as 0, which almost resulted in southern delegates walking out of the convention. The South would have this low-grade paranoia running through its existence all the way through the end of their system, through the end of the Civil War and the defeat of the Confederacy in 1865. The paranoia that they would be isolated, surrounded, and their system would collapse. But most immediately in 1787, they were afraid that they would be permanently outvoted in the House of Representatives, because if you only counted free persons, then Northerners would outnumber Southerners by almost 2-1 at the time. So they absolutely needed, the Southerners absolutely felt they needed the slaves to count, because otherwise they would not get the representatives that they wanted, and they felt that their interests would not be adequately represented. And other compromises like that too, like with electing the president. Some wanted the people to vote for the president directly. Others said, well, maybe Congress should elect the president, to which yet others immediately objected, no, you can't do that. Because if you had Congress electing the President of the United States, then the President would be subservient to Congress, which violates separation of powers, you see. So they settled on the Electoral College, which is actually a more straightforward system than most people believe. And later in the course, I explain it very clearly. It's a system that's easy to understand. If you give about like 30 minutes to an hour and you delve into the inner workings of the system. So anyway, note that representation, even proportional representation in the House, is state-based. In other words, congressional districts do not overlap state boundaries. So Nevada has 4 congressional districts. It has 4 representatives based on its relatively small population compared to the rest of the country. Every district, all 4 of them, is confined entirely within the borders of Nevada. California, which is obviously a neighboring state, and the most populous one in the country still, despite the exodus in recent years, California, which has over 39 million people, has 52 congressional districts. And again, every single district lies fully within California's geographical boundaries. All right, so I think this is enough for today, and thank you for your attention.